I'm Jim Miller, and you're watching MyMMAnews.com.
So you just held a seminar at MMA Signatures Gym in Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania. Can you discuss what you went over and what you taught some of the students coming in?
Today at the seminar, we went over some wrestling for MMA and Jiu-Jitsu, and then we did some stuff from topside. So it was a good mix of both on the feet and on the mat, and some of the techniques that I use all the time.
And you mentioned while you were doing your seminar that you've been wrestling obviously since a young age, 3 years old. You mentioned. Now you and Dan both obviously coming from a wrestling background. What made you make that transition into MMA? Because obviously wrestling is still a thriving sport, but what made you transition into MMA?
You know, I was always a fan. I think I saw my first UFC. I think I was in 7th grade. The high school wrestling coach, I went to the high school wrestling camp, and he brought a tape of like UFC 3 or something like that, and was a fan of it. You know, I mean, my brothers and I, we grew up watching Van Damme movies and stuff like that, and you know, kickboxer and blood sport. So we always thought it was kind of cool, and then having watched, you know, MMA, it was something I was kind of a fan of, and I was, I think, 21 when I started training, and finally, you know, made the move to step in the door, and one thing kind of led to another pretty quickly.
Now during the seminar today, you had an unexpected guest come in.
Yeah.
Art Jimmerson, UFC 1. Mm-hmm. And he came over to us and was, I don't even know if Jim Miller knows who I am. You know what I mean? So what was that like to meet a legend, have him come crash your seminar, and like, he knows who you are, but doesn't know that you know who he is?
You know, it's pretty cool, because I've seen the videos of Art fighting, and I mean, who could forget, you know, coming in with one boxing glove. You know, it's really cool. I didn't expect him to walk through the door today, and you know, it's the first time I've had the opportunity to meet him, and it's pretty neat. He's a legend in the sport, you know. So.
Now tell us what's been going on lately at Miller Brothers MMA. What's good for you guys?
You know, back in New Jersey at Miller Brothers MMA, we've got a really good amateur group of guys coming up. Our AMA guys are kicking ass and taking names, and it's pretty cool to have an impact, and to see guys that walk through the door completely raw with nothing except some high school wrestling and maybe a little training here or there at different schools, and within a few months they're killers, and they're definitely guys that you got to keep an eye on when you're training with them on the mat too.
Now I'm curious, the teacher life versus fighter life. What would you prefer? Because, you know, oftentimes you much rather like give other people your knowledge instead of getting knee, punch, kick. We talked about that off camera. So what do you prefer, and how do you take teaching and find a fondness in it? You know what I mean? Giving your knowledge to other people.
You know, the fighter life is like, there was a period in my life where I was only a professional fighter, and it was pretty awesome. You know, it was just to live the life and train, and that was it. And you know, I'd started a family and stuff like that, so I had a couple kids, and now it's like, okay, you add on all the other things, business owner, and trying to do other things, and it gets a little bit more tiring. But it's cool to instruct people. It's cool to teach people, and to see a change in them. See a change in their confidence, and see a change in their technique. You know, it's definitely something that I enjoy, and it's hard for me personally, because my game is extremely basic. I don't do flashy things, but I have a couple things that I do, and it's really just comes down to the approach and the way you do them. You know, drilling the basics and kind of kind of being mean about it, you know, and having pressure and making your opponent uncomfortable. Really is what it comes down to.
Now, going on your last statement there, and you mentioned this during the seminar, your pressure jiu-jitsu opposed to, like I said, traditional jiu-jitsu. Why would you maybe advocate that, and how is it different from, let's say, traditional Brazilian jiu-jitsu?
I wouldn't say it's so much different. It's just that there is that, it's called the gentle way, and there's this idea that you're only going to take what's given to you. But when you've got somebody who's either the same size as you or potentially bigger, and they have a little bit of knowledge, at least, you have to force them to make mistakes. You have to force them to give you opportunities, and by being physical and putting pressure on guys, and one of the things that we went over today was just a grip on the controlling the arm and the tricep, and really using the bone of your forearm, and then a grip in the stand-up work that we did, using basically the same bones in the wrist and the thumb to create more pressure in somebody. But without doing that, they're not going to do what you want them to do, and that's kind of the idea, is to get them to do what you want to do.
Now, you also mentioned before, you're not the biggest advocate of fighting in New York. You've done it twice now. Now, other fighters, you're not the only one, have complained, and obviously they're still new to this. Mm-hmm. Can you say, one, what you cannot stand about fighting in New York, and two, how you might think they might be able to prevent it in the future and help other fighters wanting to fight there?
The way to for New York to fix it is to stop trying to reinvent the wheel. I've had the pleasure of fighting in New Jersey nearly 20 times. I fought in Vegas half a dozen times. Things run smoothly. We know that the Jersey Commission is looking after fighters' health. We know that anybody with the actual commission, which is pretty much everybody now, is looking after the fighters. But New York just they create these rules that they don't tell anybody about. I didn't know, and no other fighter knew about the 5-pound difference for catch weights until the morning of weigh-ins. I had a UFC rep knocking on my door as I'm sitting in a hot bath trying to lose weight, and had to explain the rule to me. And he found out that morning too. So there's a lack of communication. There's all these things, and then the lack of communication with the rules, or even like I was suspended after my fight with Alves, and the New York Commission didn't tell anybody. They didn't tell the UFC. They didn't tell anybody until about 3 weeks before I was supposed to fight in New York again. So then I had to scramble to try to get to a neurologist and do all these things, jump through all these hoops. So.
You discussed your Lyme disease, and it had an big effect on your career. Can you discuss that? And you and your mother, if I'm not mistaken, just did a fundraiser.
Yeah.
Wife, I'm sorry. Just did a fundraiser recently.
Mm-hmm.
How does that made your career better? Finally, discovering that, and then also the letting people know, the awareness.
It sucks. Lyme disease does suck, and I had the opportunity to go to a fundraiser with the Global Lyme Alliance, and I think they raised over $800,000 for Lyme disease research. It's crazy because it's something that affects tons of people, and it doesn't matter your age, it doesn't matter anything, and Lyme disease gets basically zero funding for research from the government, and Zika virus only affects developing children, and if you're exposed to it, you just have to not get pregnant within 6 months. And Zika gets tens of millions of dollars more for research than Lyme disease does. And this year, actually, the forecast for it looks pretty bad for the Northeast, New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Connecticut, So it sucks, you know, but it's one of those things that I feel comfortable that I found it. We figured it out. Figured out what was wrong. It wasn't just being a professional fighter for 10 years that was making me feel like garbage. And while I'm not out of the woods with it, you know, because unfortunately it got to the point where it was chronic. So it's something that it's taking. You know, I've changed my diet. I'm on medication and trying to beat it. But knowing what it is, it gives me a little peace of mind. So there definitely is that. So it's like when I feel like garbage, at least I know why, and it's not like, oh man, I'm just getting old.